little note of this one. It is worth pointing out what an agent does for the client as well. Like, why do clients want to work with an agent? And I think you guys hit on that really well, which is it's a curated group. If you call up, and anybody can send out a postcard, anybody can set up a web page. I was about to say anybody can take out a page in a source book, but that dates me horribly into the 90s. But nowadays, so it's relatively, the threshold to call yourself an illustrator is quite low. That bar is very low. And I can absolutely see from a client point of view where an agent has gone through and vetted people and figured out who's reliable and who hits the deadlines and who can take feedback versus, just an individual person who, it's a little bit more of a gamble if you don't have that personal recommendation.
It's almost like a license to draw.
A little bit.
You've definitely been vetted, and so it's a good thing. It's a great point to bring up. Next topic, how an agent can hurt your career. There's not many things that I wrote here.
I want to just insert a question somebody asked in the chat here, and they asked, do reps handle all of the communication aspects, or does the client work with the illustrator directly? And in my experience is my agent is there at the beginning to negotiate the deal, and then she leaves the day in, day out communication that happens on the project. She leaves that alone, and then she'll come back in to handle payments, to settle, the finishing, to make sure everything's been delivered on my end and they're delivering what they promised on their end. That doesn't mean I won't CC her on communications. If there's milestones, like if I turn in, all the sketches for a book, I'll CC her on that just so she knows that I'm completing my end of the deal. But she's not a go-between between me and the editors.
Right, and I agree. That's exactly how I use my agents as well. Will, how does yours work like that? You still here?
El Capitan.
Well, if you're going to ask me, I need to feel like I can answer this. No, I think that the question that you just posed there is probably the most important question. And I was looking for a graphic that I made a while back, but as I analyzed this, I found that a rep and the artist actually have, if you think of each as a set of desires and interests and wants, and those two circles intersect each other, the common area, in my opinion, is actually smaller than I think a lot of people would think. I think your tendency is to think that your rep and you are on the exact same page, but there are quite a bit of differences along the way. And are you going to list those out, or do you want to talk about those?
Are you talking about the thing that I have up on the screen now? Yeah, may have different goals than you. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and I think that ultimately is why most people end up leaving their rep.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, people change.
And one of them might be, the rep wants to maximize money, revenue, and the artist might really want to be selective on the type of work that they take. My good friend Brett Hellquist turned down a lot of projects early on in his career, and I really feel that the projects that he turned down, he would share some of those with me. He just said, I just don't feel like they're right. Whereas I was taking everything that came in because it paid money, and my ideals back then, 20 years ago, were very different than they are now. I've learned to be more like my friend Brett, where life is short, and I want to work on things that promote my career and do and help me with my mission statement with my art. Whereas in the past, I would just take anything, and then I'd be really frustrated, and I'd turn out really bad art. I wouldn't even call it art. And so sometimes you'll have an agent or a rep that will really try to shove things down your throat because they're thinking about their interests, and they're thinking, well, obviously the artist wants to make money too, and you do, but maybe you want to be a little bit more selective. So that would be one that I would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes sense, and I do think that's why most people leave their rep. It's just tough to maintain the same goal the whole time. And as you get more experience and as you go through your career, you find that you have specific jobs that you like to take and other ones that you don't. And as I've gone through, I take less and less jobs that are offered to me because they kind of don't, like Will said, push your career in the direction. They don't push your career forward like you want them to. So you take less and less, and that can make an agent not happy. Ryan, what do you think about that when an artist says, I don't want to take this awesome paying job? Does it piss you off?
No, I guess I'm pretty much an idealist when it comes to that. Just because, I'm an illustrator first, right? And 18 years of being an illustration, student of illustration and the career and the business side of everything, right out of school, I had a rep for 6 years, and it was a huge rep. I'm not going to name any names. It was a huge, one of the biggest reps at the time, and we had different goals towards the end, and that's why I left. But again, with the business model of Spinning Yarn, it is a small curated group, highly vetted. So where yes, the big paying jobs are phenomenal, but in the end, it's not me making that decision. It's the artist that's creating the work.
Right. Exactly.
I think for me, and Will touched on this too, these are conversations you need to be having consistently with your agent, especially that first conversation where your agent's, she's interviewing you, you're interviewing her, and you guys are kind of feeling each other out. You need to be upfront and say, listen, I'm about long-term goals. We had the discussion. Do you want to do books that will win awards, or do you want to do books that sell a lot? That are very marketable and do well. Financially, what is it? I mean, there's upsides to both different directions, and so we had these conversations, and she can steer me in whatever direction that I feel like I want to do and where I want to go. And I might say, let's try this out for a couple of years and then talk again and see if it's working for us or not. And so I think that's how you can maintain that relationship, just by keeping those open lines of communication about what you're wanting and what they're wanting. And what they can do for you.
Let's
Can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
How can you say no when I ask so nicely, right?
No, I'm not going to give it to you.
Is it? Are you seeing it?
Yep. It's up there.
Are you seeing the artists, reps, agents with small talent pools?
No.
I see your drive, your Google Drive.
Oh darn. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Right there. How about now?
Yes.
There we go. Yep, got it.
Okay. So this was a graphic that I made, and I should have shared this with you earlier, Lee. But as I see it, when the agent or rep has a smaller talent pool, I think your shared interests are more in line. But I think when the talent pool gets bigger, I think it looks more like this.
Totally agree. And that's the hard part, is agents typically keep growing, and so you may start out with that first version you had and then end up with the one that you're showing now.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why you always got to talk to the agent too, and make sure that what their goals are kind of line up with what you want to be a part of as well. It's a great graphic, Will.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for sharing it with me.
Yep. There's sarcasm in there?
No
Oh,
sarcasm at all. Okay, so let's move on. I do have a section where we're going to go through breaking up with your agent, so we can talk about some more of this stuff as we go. They do take a significant fee from the job, which I'm going to talk about in a second. If they get you work that you'd never get otherwise, this is kind of a moot point, but it's a big fee, which I'll show you in a minute. And it can affect your income pretty significantly. How much do agents charge? This varies. Typically, just the general artist agent is between 25 and 33%. A literary agent goes down a little bit to 15%. If anybody wants to chime in the chat, if they know portrait art agents and licensing agents, I did send out a couple of emails, but I didn't get them back in time for this. So I don't know. I don't know what they charge, if it's the same or a little bit different. You guys have any knowledge of those two roles or these numbers? Does that look right to you guys?
That looks right to me.
That looks right.
I don't know portrait or licensing, but
I'd like to find out. I don't know about the portrait. I'm really curious about the licensing, though, because a lot more people are starting to get into that. So I'll try to find out, and we'll update some of this stuff on the SVS forum if you guys are interested in that, because I'm kind of curious about that.
I had someone ask me once if they should sign a contract for 40% going to the agent.
Oh my God.
Oh, God.
That's brutal.
Actually, you know what? This may or may not be the time for that. And Lee, let me know if this has worked into it. I would love to get a sense of where that percentage comes from. The 25 to 33%. Like what aspects are included in that? When I had an agent, I just never had the guts to ask them.
In terms of what is like if somebody's charging 33%, does that include advertising and?
Exactly. Like what, versus a licensing agent, and given the way that technology has changed, there was a time when an artist agent had to send tear sheets, so they were constantly mailing things back and forth, and the startup costs for creating a website. It was all new. We were talking when I had my agent. We're talking in the late 90s. So, the internet was still very new, and there was just a lot of sort of perceived startup costs. Nowadays, I'm not sure that, at least from my perspective, I'm not sure that holds up anymore. And yet, those fees haven't gone down. They've actually started creeping up. It was 25% when I had an agent, and I'm now hearing about 35%. Would just love to get a clear insight, and I'm sure for anybody who's thinking about an artist-only agent, that's something to really consider.
I do have a section where we talk about advertising, but if Ryan wants to go ahead and speak to that, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely touch on that. The artists that I represent don't carry any advertising cost with us. We bear the brunt of that.
Okay.
So far in the 2 years that we've existed, we've handled that internally. Normally, if it's something outrageous, in the contract it states that the group of artists as a pool would bear the brunt of 50%, while the house would cover the other 50%. So far, we haven't had to come up with something outrageous as far as a marketing scheme, because what we have found in the 2 years that we've existed, we've pretty much just been doing well without, taking ads out in source books. We still come up and do, mailers here and there, but again, the artists don't have to bear that cost.
Okay, good. Definitely good to know.
That is good to know.
I've had mixed experience with that. I do have a section on advertising, so we'll hit on that again in a little bit.
I have heard that the cost for 30 to 35% or even 25% is based on the past, basically, when we had to pay for printing and
Right.
and
Exactly.
a lot of that stuff. I'm answering questions too, so if you guys already mentioned that, I apologize. But yeah, that's
I think all agents need to go down to 10%, right, Ryan?
Sure.
No, I do think that's an interesting discussion to have, because Will's absolutely right. When it was starting out, there were significant costs to get images out there, because the internet had not become the ubiquitous tool that it is now. Whereas now, those costs are relatively non-existent, and certainly not more than would be borne by any illustrator. Every illustrator is required, of course, to have some kind of a website, some kind of a presence,
Right.
which is no more or less expensive, at least in my understanding, than what an agent would have. So these are discussions that are definitely worth having as technology changes and as the industry standards change.
I love that. Go ahead, Ryan.
I think back when I had an agent, it went up from 25% when I was first signed on, and by the time I ended up leaving, it was at 30%. And then in addition to that, if they took out pages in a source book, there was an additional cost taken out on top of that percentage, where, you know, there isn't that for me for any of the artists that we represent.
Cool.
The 25 to 30% still covers the cost of mailings and other promotional stuff as well. So, while,
So,
you know, go ahead. I'm sorry, David.
I was going to ask, as an agent, is that your biggest cost? That is the biggest, the sort of the biggest part of your budget is promotion. It's not, you know, I don't know, phones or rent or
No.
some other thing that I'm not even thinking of.
The largest part of the budget, the largest part of the, I guess, overhead for an agency, obviously, is the creative promotional aspect of everything. Nowadays, you know, because of the internet, no one really needs to have an office space, right? I don't need to go rent an office in Midtown Manhattan to be an agent anymore. So it's not rent. If you're dealing with an agency that is huge and has those offices in Midtown, then, you know, you're probably looking at a higher roster, larger roster, and most of their overhead will be that rent in space.
Okay.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating.
One thing I would add to that, just a little caveat, is I this last year I got the biggest job that I've ever gotten with any of the reps that I've had or that I've got on my own, and my rep charges 30%, which is really high, and it started at 25 and then moved up, and you know, a lot of artists kind of complain and everything, and when the job came in, I came up with how much I needed to get for that job to take it, and we ended up negotiating for double that. So even with the 30% that I ended up paying the rep, I got twice as much as what I was hoping to get.
Awesome.
Now that doesn't happen all the time. In fact, I would say that's you know, that's an outlier. But I was happy to pay that 30% to get what I got.
Yeah, there's a value that comes with it, is what you're saying. Absolutely.
I'm gonna add one more thing too. I have a literary agent. I don't have an artist agent, and my agent takes 15%, but she takes 15% of the advance that I get, and then also royalties as well. And so that's typically why the literary agents are, I think, in a smaller percentage bracket, because they know they can get their money over the long tail of the return on whatever you're working on. Whereas when you're doing, you know, many of these illustration jobs is a book cover or something, which is a one-time fee, and I think that's why it's a higher percentage.
That's fantastic, Jake. I've never thought about that, and I think that makes perfect sense. That's awesome. Really good. I had one thing up on the screen here. Does everyone need an agent? We're going to hear from David in a little bit on his choice not to have an agent, but you do not absolutely need an agent. So I just want to throw that out there while we're in the discussion. A lot of people are in this stage. If you're a student or a new graduate, how to know if you're ready to seek representation. So just in terms of your work, I came up with 7 kind of criteria. And then one thing you don't want to worry about. First thing is your work starts to naturally attract a lot of attention. This is not without you blabbing about it or post. I mean, you do want to post it obviously to your social media, but you'll just notice people gravitating towards your work. If it's in where I started noticing this was in the classroom, where everybody's putting their work up for critique, and then all of a sudden, 5 or 6 people will gather around an image. I started to pay attention to whose images that happens with. And I love that moment in a class critique, because nobody is forced to look at a piece or talk to a piece. Everybody just kind of goes to where they naturally go. And you'll start to see some people hitting that moment a lot more than others. And I started to pay attention to that in my own work. Like, are people gravitating towards it or not? If you're starting to get better and getting to that pro level, your work will naturally attract it, whether it's online, social media, or just in the physical world. Your teachers and your peers will start to recommend you. That's a big deal, because their reputation is on the line when they recommend you. And if they trust you enough and they're thinking that you're good enough, that means that you are definitely on your way, and they're not just giving you lip service, that they believe in the work that you're doing. Number 3, you'll start to receive formal rewards. Anytime, these are kind of in chronological order, in my opinion, of importance, how much weight I think each one of them holds. When money and awards and things like that start to get in the mix, that's when you know it's going to be serious, because people are actually backing you with something tangible. You start getting paid jobs. This is a big one. Even if they're small jobs, the fact that people are willing to, like, say, hire you to do a magazine spot illustration, or a commissioned portrait, or whatever it is, you start getting real money for it. You definitely know you're on your way. And if you're starting to get consistent money, that could be a good sign to go ahead and that you might need a rep. The next couple that I have here are just in terms of your own working methods. And your time. You're comfortable with your technique and ability. You don't want to be at the point where you're looking for a rep and you still have no idea what you're doing with technique. Like, one week you're painting in oil, the next week you're working watercolor, and I don't mean just dabbling and playing, because everybody does that. I mean you have not found how you like to work yet. Probably don't want to see a rep if you don't have that. Oops. There we go. You're able to produce high quality work without too much feedback, and you can make changes fairly easily. This is important in terms of being a professional illustrator, has not just with dealing with a rep, but just being a pro illustrator. When you're in school, a lot of times there's a lot of feedback channels. So a student may start with a piece that's not that great, and then the class and the teacher critique it, and they come back and they make it better. And sometimes students are awesome about this, and it's a great quality to have if you're willing to keep going back to a piece and make it better. But you're probably not ready for a rep if you can't get a piece to that point without all those steps. So I don't want to stop you from getting feedback and doing that, but when you're going to be a pro, you should probably be able to do it fairly easily. This is a tough one, and I get a lot of emails about this from early pros and new pros. You have enough time to do the work. If you have a full-time day job and you're making your segue into illustration, that's a tough moment. And if you've got a rep that gets you this huge job, but you can't do it because you have a full-time job, you got some tough choices to make. Probably not a good idea to take on a full-time rep if you don't have the time to do the work. Oh, and then my last one is a don't. Don't pay, a lot of students probably watching this, don't pay too much attention to your grades. Getting straight A's in art school is probably the easiest thing on the planet. If you're not getting A's in art school, you're doing something very wrong. Turn in your work, show up.
Be there. Yep.
Just show up, put a mannequin in your seat if you're not there. As long as there's something in your seat and you're turning in work, you know, the grades in art school are the least of your concerns. So don't think that, oh, I got out and I got straight A's, so I should probably be able to get a rep. It really does have to do with your work. And I just want to say that because some people really tie, especially at the student level, tie a lot of importance to the grade. And it is important for scholarships, things like that. But the work is obviously going to be the main thing. Do you guys have anything else to add in terms of the actual work and when people should know to be ready to approach a rep?
I can just speak of my own experience if you want.
Please, yeah.
So I was approached by my agent probably 4 years before I actually agreed to start working with her. And she had seen some comics work that I'd been doing that was actually getting published in anthologies. And she was familiar with the other artists that were doing those comics. And she had talked to them, and they sent me or sent her my name, and so that's why she contacted me. And we had a conversation. We were on the phone for well over an hour where she just told me what she does as an agent, what I want to do, what my goals are, my future aspirations as an illustrator was. But ultimately, I said, you know what, I'm not ready to sign on with you. I have this full-time job. I just don't have enough time to put into taking on these side projects, whatever work you'd be getting me. And she said, okay, well, you know my number. Call me when you're ready. 4 years later, 3 or 4 years later, and I kept in touch with her over the years. Once a year, just touch base, how things are going, what are you working on? And then what happened was I was approached by Scholastic. They just started an imprint called Graphics, where they were making graphic novels for kids. And they approached me and said, we really like your comics work that you've been doing, and we think you'd be great to do a graphic novel. Are you interested at all in doing a graphic novel? And that's when I knew that I was ready for it, and I wanted to have her help negotiate this deal for me. So that's when I called her back and said, hey, I think I'm ready for this. I've got a job lined up, and do you want to represent me? And so that's my story, and we've been working together ever since then. That was back in 2008, and 9 years now we've been working together.
That's amazing, and that's the only rep you've had, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome.
And I'll follow up that super optimistic story with mine, which is I really wish I'd seen this list before I graduated and immediately ran out to get an agent. We'll talk more about that later. I'm going through this, and I was thinking back, to being 21 and graduating, and be like, nope, number 2, nope, number 3, nope.
So you tried to get a rep, and it didn't work out so well?
Oh, I got a rep.
But
Did it work out well? No. I mean, it's no one's fault. It was a bad pairing, really, and we'll talk about that and why I decided to go solo for such a long time.
I was about 28 years old when I signed on with her, and it was, I was being into my professional career. I was doing a lot of work for animation studios and things like that, but I had these aspirations in publishing, and so that's why it probably took me longer to move into that phase with her.
Oh, that's such a smarter way to do it. It really is. I will heartily recommend that to anybody.
That brings me to the question on the screen: is if you have all of these things going, but you don't have any work yet? Let's just say you're at number 4. You're getting paid. You're not really getting paid, but you fit the bill for all the rest of them. Should beginners or recent grads start searching for work, searching for an agent before they actually have work experience, or would you guys recommend getting a few jobs under your belt and then trying to get the agent?
Could I answer that first?
Yeah, please.
Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule because you're dealing with some grads that definitely work while they're in school and have that ability to do that, especially maybe like MFA students, graduate students.
Sure.
My gut feeling on this is I would probably suggest 8 times out of 10 that recent grads should not look for an agent. The reason for this is I think they should know the business and know the ins and outs of the business before they trust somebody to run a business for them.
Great point.
If you don't know the business, how can you instruct somebody who's supposed to be your partner in this business venture into a direction that you want to go if you don't know how to get there yourself or how to manage that yourself? So I think just at least 2 years solo, get some experience under your belt, make a few bad deals. Those are all learning experiences, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay,
I'll follow up on what Ryan just said, because he talked about the idea. You define it, and I really like this. You define the illustrator-artist-agent relationship as a partnership, and when you know nothing about the business, suddenly it's not really a partnership. Your agent is more like your boss. because you'll just defer to the agent in every situation. And of course, they can't help. Even the best agent is still going to make choices that are in their best interest. It makes perfect sense. And so, yeah, if you don't know anything about the business, that's not a partnership. It really is an employer-employee relationship, and I think that's a mistake.
Awesome. God, those are great points. The next question I get a lot with portfolios and work and things from newer artists is, can and should an artist have more than one style when submitting to an agent? Is that a drawback or a plus, Ryan?
For me, again, my business model is totally different from most. For me, it is a drawback. The artists that I represent, it's highly curated. It's geared towards 1 to 2 different markets. Like each illustrator's work is geared towards 1 to 2, maybe 3 different markets, but there is a level of consistency within their work. I think it's difficult to try to sell an illustrator's work when it looks so pieced together. Like the art director doesn't know which illustrator is going to show up, right? So it's like, which style am I going to get if I hire this illustrator? So, and I hate the word style, and you and I, Lee, had this discussion before, but it's essentially what that is. And if there isn't that consistency, then it's hard to sell and talk up.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So the next section we're on, you're ready for an agent. So what do you do now? You got to find an agent. Where do you find them? There's a book out. I always recommend anything that has a lot of resources to it. The Guide to Literary Agents, if you're into the publishing side of things. This is what it looks like. It's $20 well spent. It'll say things like how many deals the agent has made in the last year, what they focus on, submission guidelines, anything having to do with getting an agent will be in this book. Again, this one's geared towards publishing. If you're going towards those other markets like licensing, portrait, or I don't know, you're going to have to use Google. I hate to say that. I couldn't find anything better than this resource. Do you guys know of another place to start researching agents that's kind of more than just a Google search?
I would probably look at artists that you like, the type of work that they do, and do a little bit of research and see if they are represented. And if so, follow that link and see what kind of talent that agency has, and if you can, either fit in or provide something that that agency doesn't have currently. And obviously it's not just love at first sight. I mean, there's some vetting going on here. So.
Right. Very good.
To follow up on that, once again, we're in a completely new, wonderfully socially connected age. Illustrators are so damn nice and friendly. If you're following someone, this is following a little bit of what Ryan was just talking about, but and it's not exactly a Google search, although it's kind of it's a little more curated than that, where you're going through and you're defining, okay, I like, these 15 artists. Send them a message. Flatter them first, and then say, "Would you mind telling me who your agent is?" Which is just fantastic for that.
Yeah, great idea.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Yeah.
So what do you do once you find an agent? You research them thoroughly, like they were saying, like Ryan and David were just saying. Look at their roster, see how you would fit in that roster. So what market do they represent? Who are their clients and who are their artists? Make sure you know all about them. Who else do they rep, and how do you fit in? Just a side note to this, you don't want to be too close to somebody on an agent's roster, and you don't want to be too far off from it either. When I was first trying to get a rep, when I was first starting out a long time ago, I would contact these reps I thought were great, but I'd just land too close to somebody they already had, and then they didn't think that they could get me they couldn't make me stand out individually in that group. And then obviously you don't want to stick out too far. So you just want to be kind of right there in that sweet spot. Once you find out you find an agent that you're matching with, and you fit their roster, and you want to work for the kind of clients they get. You find out about their submission policy. Ryan, what is your submission policy, and what do artists have to do?
Currently, we aren't taking in submissions, but that doesn't necessarily mean don't submit to us. My business model is small, like a handful of illustrators, and I don't want a huge agency. It is more about the quality of the work for me that we're putting out. I knew going into this that I'm not going to be rich, and it was never about that for me. So I think submit anyway, and we are constantly looking. But again, my agency is not that type to just take on 5 and 6 and 10 at a time.
Right.
If something strikes our fancy, we will definitely reach out.
What does a submission look like, though, to you? Is it an email? Is it a web link? What is it?
Well, don't start an email saying, hey, for one.
Sorry.
This is just kind of common sense. Introduce yourself. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Don't just say, here's a link to my work. Tell us who you are. Because, I have no idea what you're like, what your dislikes. Tell us something about our agency that you've actually kind of looked at and did some research, and tell us why you feel like you fit in or what we're missing that you can provide. It's just like any other job. I am not your employer, but I'm not just going to take on anybody.
Right. Awesome.
So can I translate one thing? Because you initially said that you're not currently, I may have the phrasing wrong, not currently accepting submissions, but you're always looking. Does that mean that if someone saw a posting or checked out the book that Lee posted, and it says currently accepting submissions, that just means that they move past if somebody good comes over the transom, I will definitely look at their stuff, but they're actually like, no, they're like sticking their head out the transom looking for new people. Is
right.
that okay?
Yeah, I'm not looking to grow, but I am open to growth if that right thing that just kind of comes along, and I don't know what it is. I can't say I'm looking for this at this moment. I'm happy with where we're at, but if something comes across my desk that I really need to give my attention, then I definitely will be open to that.
Got it. Okay, that's cool.
Okay, so I'm going to move along. We're about an hour in, I believe. How long are we wanting this to go, guys? Is there any kind of guideline so I can figure out what to do here?
I got to get back to drawing at some point, so.
We gonna?
I'm probably good for another 15, 20 minutes. I love talking about this stuff.
I'm gonna go a little faster because I want to get to some of the stuff at the end. So can you?
And we also have a bunch of questions piling up too. We might have to answer those in the forum or something.
Okay, let me cruise through, and maybe we'll try to get to those because I really do want to get people's feedback and answer the questions they have. So I'm going to cruise through this. You guys stop me if I'm totally off on something or you have something important to add, but I should be able to just cruise to the end because I want to hear see Ryan's critiques and things and see the artist too. So can you submit to multiple agents at once, and should you tell them that you're submitting? I say yes. And this is just based on research and my own opinions too, but I did research all this stuff. 6 to 8 at a time is what I would say. Like if you get the the Guide to Agents book, 6 to 8 at a time, and then use those first couple that you send out. If they send you feedback and you don't get signed, then use that feedback to change your work or change your submission, and then polish the work and the submission as you go. Don't just send out 100 all at once.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
Don't cut and paste. Don't cut and paste.
Concern.
I think when you Frankenstein an email together, I can pretty much tell if you don't change the formatting. So don't tell me something about another agency that I don't have in my agency. And so, I guess tailor your email and tailor your submissions, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
And that actually speaks to kind of what I'm recommending here too, because if you're doing 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever at a time, it's easy to do that. If you're submitting 100, it's hard to do that, and so that's when you get the Frankenstein email if you're trying to submit too much.
Right.
Ryan, I know we're supposed to be moving along, but I'm just curious. We have you as the insight. When you get that Frankenstein email, what goes through your head? But how do you, like, what's the thing that it sort of hits you in the gut?
I guess my biggest pet peeve would be the "hey," that would be good, or just immediately check out my work with no body to email. But the Frankenstein email is, I don't get too much of that, but when it does come across my desk, it's kind of humorous because some of the stuff they've cut and paste clearly isn't my agency just because of what they are saying, and it's I don't even bother to look at the work at that point. I mean, when I see 2 different fonts sizes or 2 different font styles, those are like dead giveaways, and then I just kind of like, I don't take them as seriously. So.
Right. Okay, what should you look for in an agent? Obviously, we talked a lot about that, so I'm not going to spend time on that. They match your market, how it fits within their group, and you agree on major points of how they're approaching their business. You get along with them personally. That's a big deal. Like you've heard Ryan and David both talking about this as a partnership. Some people refer to it almost as a marriage. It really is a long-term relationship, and you gotta make sure that everything meshes there. How can you help your agent be good at their job? Send them regular updates and images to them, which I need to do a little bit more of. Be proactive in your marketing and your online presence. Like I said earlier, once you sign with an agent, that doesn't mean you're just done with everything and you can sit back and sketch in your sketchbook. You're still part of the whole deal, and you just have somebody helping you along the way. So be proactive. How is advertising handled? We talked a little bit about that earlier. It really does vary. So once you get a bite, if you send out a bunch of work and you get a bite from a rep that might rep you, just figure out what you're comfortable with. I've had, some do 0%, like Ryan was saying. It's changed a lot, like David was saying, with more stuff being online, and those hard costs aren't associated with it. So definitely just want to ask. But in the beginning, be sure that you're comfortable with how advertising is handled. If they say, hey, you're going to pay for half or all of your advertising and you don't have a budget for that, you really need to let them know early on. How much advertising should you do personally? Talk to your agent. Obviously, you're going to come up with a strategy. Ryan's probably going to disagree with me here. I hate source books. Source books are those big throwbacks from the 80s where it's a big, thick book and you paid $3,000 to be a part of it.
They're great doorstops.
They are great doorstops. I use them as kindling. So those are pretty much dead to me, Ryan, but you said you're advertising it at work. So what do you think?
No, I don't. I'm with you on this one.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say that. Yeah, try not to do the source books. You'll still get calls from all the different ones. One of them in particular is kind of pesters a lot of illustrators. I just don't. I've tried it, and a lot of people tried it, and it hasn't worked for most people that I've talked to. Maybe a few, but be careful there. Be active on your social media. Build your brand by linking with your agent, so you guys are referencing each other in Facebook and Instagram, and again, don't sit back and think they're doing everything for you. What if an agent asks you to do a job that you don't want to do? You got to be open and honest and talk about why you don't want to do it. But you absolutely do not have to take a job because an agent wants you to do it. And don't feel pressured if you're new to an agency and it's not pushing your career in the right direction. Don't feel bad about backing away from that. By the way, they don't want to steer you in the wrong direction either. If you're happy and making money, they're going to be happy and also making money. What's the right way to leave an agent? This is the last little section before we get to Ryan. Again, be open and honest. Try to work it out. Keep all your correspondence for records. If you're saying, hey, I want to get more work in this market, and they're saying, sure, let's do that, and then they don't do anything to push you in that market, well, then you have kind of a track record for why you might leave them down the road. This is a big one. And
can I answer the question right there, Lee?
Please, yeah.
From Tanny, she says, And the reason I'm not inserting all the other questions because I think this goes right along with what you're saying. Does it damage your reputation to leave a rep?
No, I don't think so. What do you guys think? Why would it?
No?
No.
I guess I suppose it depends on the context. I mean, if you're doing something super dodgy, it's a small like every other industry. It's a small industry. So if you're leaving because there's a genuine, just a parting of the ways, the agent wants to do one thing and you want to do something else, I don't think that's a problem at all. On the other hand, if your agent is taking 30% and you found one that takes 25, and you decide that you're gonna, grab this job and yank it over to a new agent, yeah, that'll hurt.
Great point.
They still talk.
But, to add to that, a lot of this, this relationship's based on trust, right? I mean, I'm going into this as an agent, but then I also go into it thinking as an illustrator, and maybe that's an advantage for me in that way. But a lot of it is based on trust. You trust the agent and trust the rep to negotiate those higher prices and get what the job is actually worth. And if you have, say, a phone call that comes your way and you don't want to handle it and your rep takes 30, like David was saying, and another rep takes 25, and there's a backstabbing going on, then yeah, it could definitely hurt your career. Because, I mean, this is a small industry, and we definitely know each other. So.
Yeah, be above board. Don't do anything dodgy, because it definitely will come back to haunt you. So this question came up a lot. Should you query other agents before you leave your current agent? I found two different kind of consenting views on this. It's typically considered bad form. And then an analogy that I found more than once was, would you seek another girlfriend or boyfriend while still with the current one? But the opposite side of that is, would you ever quit a job before finding another one? So which analogy is better here?
The girlfriend, boyfriend for me.
I got to agree with that. I mean, it's a partnership, which is not the same as an employee-employer.
Yeah. Right. Okay, I tend to agree with that one as well, but I did want to throw that out there because.
One thing I would say is that another part of this analogy might be that you have a nose.
Oh, I lost you.
Lost you, Will. You guys hear him? Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, Will dropped out, so we'll see what happens. David, I'm going to move past this for a second. Sure. David doesn't have an agent. I kind of wanted him to talk to that. But let's circle back around to that because I really want to get Ryan's view on this.
Before I critique, could I provide some insight with the boyfriend-girlfriend relationship analogy?
Yeah, sure.
I think leaving, and most agencies have this kind of grace period from the time you leave to the time maybe you find another one. It's kind of built in that contract because if you leave an agency, depending on how long you were represented, there's all of that marketing and promotion done on your part from the agency standpoint. And if automatically you leave one and the next day you sign with the other, and then you get a job, there's that little sticky situation on who should handle all this. So there needs to be that grace period that kind of covers all that.
What do you think is a fair time frame?
It depends. I think it depends on how long you were with an agency.
Sure. That's great. Okay, so right now we're going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to show you two artists from Ryan's agency, Spinning Yarn, and we're going to show you two artists from the SBS forum, which I asked people to submit, the people that think they might be ready for an agent. And we're going to have Ryan give just a quick overview about what he saw in these people, what he thinks about the work. The first person that he recommended was Dola Sun. You want to talk a little bit about why you liked her work and why you signed her?
She is strong in conceptual solutions as well as narrative solutions. So, and the work, regardless if it was conceptual or narrative, on the way I was looking at it, was definitely consistent across the board. So as far as marketability, her range is quite large. Whether it's advertising, book, editorial, it's quite large. So I think that's what attracted me to Dola's work. And she's had some success right out of school. So she's one of those that are just consistent, and you ask for a solution and she'll give you 3.
Right. She's great. The work is fantastic. Are you getting her work in all those different markets you were just mentioning?
We are getting work for her in the right now in more kind of narrative markets. She also heavily promotes herself as well, so she is getting a lot of work on her own as well. So it's back and forth. I mean, she's definitely good.
Yeah, she's definitely solid. You guys can see how consistent her approach is. Really narrative and telling good stories, and her style is just on the mark every time. You know exactly who this work is from. This is not too familiar with her work, but you can see the consistency just right off the bat. It's pretty immediate. Let's go to the next one. This is, how do you say Andrea's last name? Ussini?
Yeah, it's actually a he.
Oh, okay.
Andrea Ussini. He is a Italian illustrator, but musical by training, composer actually. Just kind of picked up illustration. He hasn't been doing this long. He lives in
Amazing.
Denmark with his family on a farm, and he just came across my desk, and immediately I was attracted to the concept. It's just smart illustration.
Yeah, easy sell. What kind of market is this? Is this mostly editorial?
Mostly editorial. I'm definitely trying to get more advertising. It is a quirky style. It's not, it's heavily stylized. It's definitely not realism. But I tend to navigate towards the quirky. So
I could see this working for advertising really, really well.
Yeah.
Okay,
and,
so
I don't think he's been at it in a while. I think maybe a couple of months.
I'll agree to hate the person.
Yeah, I'm having a difficult time over here.
These are great. I mean, the concepts are great because it takes you a second to kind of figure out what's going on. They're really subtle.
Yep.
And then once you see what's going on, it's not only a pretty image, but then it has this kind of weight behind it in terms of the theme and the story.
And look, my favorite one right now is the swings with the
That's just showing.
and it was like, that's pretty, but then it's just loaded with it's heavy. I mean, it's about abduction.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing for people to be able to put out such a serious topic in such a simple image and have it weigh that
Ah,
heavily. Really cool to see this guy's work. It's really good. Okay, so I wanted to have Ryan talk about a couple of, like I said, people that are from SVS, and they had submitted their work, so I'm not putting them on the spot without them knowing about it. So this is Rich.
Randomly pick somebody.
Yeah, just welcome to seeing your stuff. This is Rich Green. He posts a lot on our forums. He's a really active user of our site and our classes. And I didn't really prep Ryan too much with him. I just sent him the link and said, "What do you think? What's your gut instincts, and what do you think?"
I think technically it's consistent, but for me, it's pretty much the same thing. As far as it's almost formulaic.
In terms of the technique, or in terms of kind of the story he's telling, or what do you?
Content. In terms of the content, I kind of like a consistency in the finish and the technique, but I think it has to do a large part with most of his imagery comes from one project.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if this is like one client that he's doing, and he's taking realism and photographs and kind of working these narratives around them, or if that's kind of a commission-based project, I'm not sure.
The problem with loading your portfolio, I mean, for me anyway, with one particular project, whether it's multiple image project, is then it starts to set a tone that now, if I'm an art director, this is the solution that I'm going to get if I'm going to hire this person.
Right, right. I totally agree. If you're looking at this, it'd be hard to say how this kind of theme would work into an actual paid project. And by the way, the rest of the panel, you guys can chime in too. Do you guys agree with what he's saying there?
Yeah.
Yeah, but although I can sort of see the other side of it too. Like, hey, weren't you guys just talking about having a consistent voice and having, a body of work that feels like it was created by one person? We're getting into some kind of abstract, a little touchy-feely kind of things where, like, Ryan may look at this and be like, yeah, it just doesn't have the kind of variety and depth that I'm going for, whereas another agent could look at this and be like, yeah, great, I got 15 pieces that are consistent across the board, and I can, go and.
I think if I were to parse what Ryan's saying, though,
Okay.
I think that if I kind of change how he's saying it, what you're seeing here is a consistent style. So it does check that box. But then what the image is and the approach is this artist is not bringing anything new to Little Bo Peep other than the novelty of whoever this little girl is. Like, whoever the girl is, she probably loves this illustration, and her family loves the illustration. But the concept he's brought to Little Bo Peep or the Pied Piper is not a significant difference than we already know of that character, other than this is just a new character that that's a photograph. So as opposed to this person who is taking these abstract concepts and really kind of nailing them, giving you a different perspective of an actual concept, is that Rich is giving us a change of perspective. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with that, and it comes down to what I think is one of the most important tools, or one of the most important things that an illustrator brings to a project, which is an opinion, a point of view, an idea that is different. Because you're absolutely right, and I think you nailed it. You're right. We are seeing, classic stories sort of done exactly the same way with the photography. Although there's a section, I was checking out Rich's portfolio, and there's a section where he moves away from inserting the photographed child, and you're here now. Yeah, I think that those distinctions are really, really important, especially if you're going to play in the sandbox of classic stories. That's where, if you've got good ideas, they really start to sing.
Yeah, and David knows what he's talking about, by the way. If you guys know David's work, he does a lot of classic fairy tales and well-known fairy tales and stories, and really does them in unique ways, unique perspectives, unique point of view. So you can start with that well-known subject matter. But I think ultimately for Rich, his next move is probably to separate out this photograph into the illustration work versus the other work, and then kind of pick where he's going with that. I feel like the photograph insertion stuff is a little too specialized. Would you agree with that overall in terms of giving him advice on how to move forward?
I would agree. I mean, I think if you're going to use a photograph the collage in, then I think it should be throughout and not just a standalone. For me, anyway. I think technically, there's talent there. It's for me. I think it's just a matter of content.
Yeah.
And voice,
Right.
I think I compare him to Scott Gustafson, who also does the fairy tale stuff. But what Scott brings to it is all this classical training. You look at one of his paintings and you could hold it up next to one of the great romantic illustrators, except he's taking that level of detail and texture and light and everything, and putting on these very simple fairy tales and making them the epic masterpieces that he sees them in his mind. And when I look at this, it doesn't really bring anything new to Three Little Pigs or Pinocchio or anything like that.
Right. All right, good feedback. The next artist section.
I just think it's hard to take me seriously with this hat, by the way.
No, I take you seriously. I love the hats. I wish my camera was working. I'm so upset about that. Anyway, so this is next website, Quiet Yell. This is Scott Monaco, and I think it's a group of people, but I couldn't tell, and so that's something that probably should be brought up at some point. But what did you think, Ryan, of this work?
Could you click on one? Yeah, there you go. First, I think as a website, one of my biggest pet peeve, if you click on an image and the screen doesn't reveal the whole image and I have to scroll through to see the whole image, I think I immediately get put off by it. And I think there was a few of his that I had to scroll through. But I think technically he's definitely there. I mean, there's definitely a market in advertising for that technical approach. A lot of advertising that we've come across isn't really high in concept. Most of the concepting is done, and you're essentially just hired to execute in that word style of yours. But I think he definitely has this consistency. But with the body of what he's showing, there's a few pieces in the whole set of portfolio that I probably would not include in there just because they are standing out like a sore thumb.
So he needs to edit quite a bit more.
Yeah. But he's definitely prolific in talent. He's definitely had a lot of experience in the creative industry. I was just looking at his bio and his resume. So
Which ones would you edit out?
I think he needs to look at this as a art director and address that. But yeah, I mean, I think the work is there.
What was that? Will was asking which ones would you cut?
Yeah.
Could you do the portfolio expanded?
How do I do? Oh, I didn't even see that link.
Like that first one just should not be up there.
Which describe it to me?
Yeah,
The
very
one with the kite?
top left.
The one you first showed.
Yeah, it definitely is a different style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like he just needs to go through and edit it out, figure out who the client is. Do you guys have trouble figuring out who the market is for this? I mean, like when we looked at this one, we know it's editorial, and we look at this one. It's kind of editorial, but you can see it being used as books. Was it as clear with Scott's work for you guys about who would use it and where it would be used and kind of the market?
It wasn't for me. I mean, I think these are rendered really well, and I think there's definitely a talent in executing the image. But for me, unless it's a specialized advertising, I couldn't place it.
Yeah, that's the kind of the sense that I got. I couldn't figure out exactly who the client is who's going to see this. It's like, oh, that's perfect for what we're doing. They're all nice images, but I just think maybe he needs to think about that client a little more and then tailor the look.
To fix that, you want to start with an actual assignment that and basically redo something that you would want to do yourself.
Correct.
So in other words, you take a book and you illustrate scenes from that book that that's popular right now and in your style, and maybe an art director sees that and can see you doing that for them.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, cool. Thanks for going over that, Ryan. I like to show kind of what the work looks like that's already signed, and then potential people that have potential into being signed. One quick second before we get to the questions, I do want to get to the audience questions. So I brought David on specifically because he doesn't have an agent. David, do you want to talk to that for 1 second? Is there anything you want to add that kind of changes?
We've gone over a variety of things, but I'll mention it just a little bit. I made the mistake, so I did undergrad, and they talked with us about senior year, go get an agent, and I thought, great, I will go get an agent. I used to define it as A, B, C, D level agents, and I think that's unfair. I think agents go for niches, and when you are looking, and you guys have all phrased it, I think, exactly the right way, look for someone who matches the kind of projects or doing the kind of projects or working with the kind of illustrators who are doing the kind of projects that you want to do. When I left school, I immediately sort of blanketed a bunch of agents and honestly signed with the first one that came along. There was no contract. That is a red flag. Leaving became very problematic, and really the choice to leave after, and I gave it a good solid 3 years before I decided to leave, and then getting the guts to actually leave was like another 6 months. It was a little bit awkward and a little bit quirky to do. This particular agent did, she went for the niche that she went for aggressively and got me work in that niche. I just made the mistake of thinking that without communicating my long-term goals, I wanted to do trade books, and this particular agent worked almost exclusively in educational, and that proved to be a bad fit. The upshot of it, of which is when I was, leaving, I got really good at the business side of things and really learned copyright and contracts and how to work with clients, which has just proved to be incredibly beneficial. Now, whatever it is now, 12, 13 years on, the idea of signing with an agent is much more appealing because I just have too much work. I don't have enough time to promote the way that I did when I was 3 years into my career and young and hungry and, making the trip to New York and hitting up every conference. Now it's like, well, life, family, houses, and just honestly too much work to be able to promote it. So now I'm actually in a position where I'm like, an agent might not be a bad thing to do, especially now at this stage of my career.
Do you wish you would have done that earlier, like at year 5, or are you glad you spent those years off or unattached from an agent?
I've been perfectly fine doing it without it. Admittedly, I'm coming off of what was a fairly sour experience. Nothing that just it left a bad taste in my mouth personally. It was because I was really invested in this early on. I came at it a little bit more cautiously, and it's really out of necessity now that I'm just aware that I'm working from project to project, and I'm not promoting in a way that should those projects end, those relationships that I have with clients. I'll mention this, that most of my projects I get from word of mouth from one art director talking to another art director, which is kind of the function that an agent serves, where they're saying, this guy is great. You're going to have a really good experience working with, this illustrator, this illustrator, this illustrator. And now I have it with art directors doing it specifically. But I'm constantly aware that those could end, and I may start sort of from ground zero in terms of promoting myself again to a completely new set of art directors who have come into the field. So yeah, that's just something to be thinking about.
That's great. I will say this before we start taking questions, that because David's been his own advocate for so many years, he knows more about the business than probably anybody I've ever met. He knows more about billing, knows more about copyright, knows more about licensing, because he had to do it all himself, and I've learned a ton from him. And when if he does go to seek another agent, he's going to be in a great position because he understands all of it in a very, very intricate way. So awesome to have all that experience. Let's hit the questions.
So Lee, I have them all copied down here, and I've deleted some that we've answered. There's too many to go through. What do you want to do?
Just go ahead and throw anyone you have out. For some reason, my camera's not working, and I'm also not able to see any of that chat. So just go ahead and throw out whatever you.
So do you want
just do like 5 questions, 10 questions, and call it good?
Yeah.
Okay. And then try to do brief answers.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. if your portfolio is strong with a few weak pieces, will that repulse an agent, or will they take you on and help you determine what pieces should be removed? That's from Joy.
Ryan, you want to hit that?
If you already think a few are weak, then why include it?
Perfect answer. That's the answer award right there. Yeah, but that's a great question. Okay, next. If you book a job on your own, do you still pay the agency a commission? That's from Linda.
There are numerous. I think it's based on the individual. We have a standard contract that goes out to our illustrators. Depending on who you are and where you're at in your career, obviously you can negotiate things a bit better. Without a proven track record, I'm not willing to let go as much with that. So I think it's different between each individual. So.
Okay. Do you normally pay? If you other guys want to chime in, just interrupt me because I'm just going to say.
I'll just add to that one. Like, yeah, I negotiated something like that with my agent, where if a job comes through and they contacted me directly and I just want to handle it myself, then she's fine with that. But she's like, send me whatever you want, and if and we've just worked that out. For the most part, if I just can't deal with it or don't want to deal with it, or if it's something so small that I don't think it's even worth her time, then I'll just deal with it myself, or I'll pass it on to her.
But you do want to stay open to them and don't be sneaky.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. How do you know if you have a bad agent? That's from
You're not
Sharon.
working. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you how I figured it out. It's when I started negotiating my own contracts. When the agent sent me a contract and I said, I don't do work for hire, and then she said, okay, and went back and renegotiated it, and then sent it to me again and it still said work for hire, and I was like, we're done. that's it. Yeah.
What I was going to say earlier, when my internet started screwing up, was, when you get together with an agent or a rep, unfortunately, artists we're dumber than ball players, and so we start out with a nose ring and they start out holding the chain. It's just the way it is when we sign the contract, in most cases that I've seen. And I'm not this is not a criticism of agents, it's more of a criticism of artists but we also lack leverage, or there's a perception that we lack leverage. And so, speaking to the breakup, if things start to go sour, it seems like after that breakup, if you signed a typical standard contract with a rep, only bad things can happen to the artist and only good things can happen to the agent. Now, that's my perspective as an artist, but David or Ryan, if you disagree.
Unfortunately, we haven't had to deal with a breakup. So, again, we're still 2 years in. We're fortunate in that way, and I'm hoping that we don't have to deal with a breakup. The way I stand, the way this whole thing for me is, the way I negotiate everything is always for the illustrator, being an illustrator myself. And, at the end of the day, whatever the best negotiation that I have made, I will always contact the illustrator and say, here it is, take it, do you want it or not? And there's no pressure on my part because I know what it's like on that other end. So in the end, I can provide guidance as far as the pros and cons to taking it or not taking it. But in the end, I think a lot of them ask me because of being an illustrator, the $100 million question is, would you take it? And if my answer is no, I will flat out tell them no.
I think you're rare in that you see both sides.
I guess I don't know. I guess I've had, just much like David, those relationships with that agent. kind of go from honeymoon to divorce, a messy divorce, rather quickly.
I think too, just going back to the how do you know if your agent's bad, you should be a part of an artist community and know other artists who have agents, and you can just talk to them and say, hey, my agent's doing this, I don't know, is that good or bad? Feel it out, see what their agent is doing, just talk to other people and see what's going on in the world, and if you're not happy, and if you're seeing that things are working a lot smoother for another person, maybe that's time to have a conversation with your agent and say, hey, what about this percentage, or what about this contract, or whatever it is that's bothering you. Yeah, just I think look at your community, look at those artists around you, and talk to them about your agents. This is all conversations that you should be having with fellow illustrators and fellow artists, contracts and agents and all that stuff.
I think it's easy.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, I'll offer one other thing, which is that contract a contract is simply an agreement between two people. And so that contract really is, honestly, it's your safety net. It's both yours as the illustrator and the agent's safety net should things go sour. And if you're in a position where you're just like, I'm not going to read the contract and just sign it, I don't think you're ready for an agent yet. I think you should be doing it solo. It's when you know enough about the business, and we've already covered this. So you know enough about the business to really enter into something that is mutually beneficial, and everybody knows what's going to happen in the best case scenarios and in the worst case scenarios.
Let me throw out a quick little question. Do you guys think that an artist has the leverage, or should assume the leverage, to cross out things in a contract with an agent or rep, like say, I'm not for this?
Yes, definitely do it.
Yes.
And you can,
are they going to ruin their chances? Because that's what the artist is going to be thinking, is I'm ruining my chances if I talk back, if I...
My point of view is this, I will always extend the contract as is, right? If you're happy with that, then go for it. If there are anything in that contract that needs to be crossed out because you are unhappy with, that contract is not a be-all, end-all. It's still in a negotiation process. Whether it's a client, whether it's an agent, a contract is not, this is it and that's it. There is still room for negotiation. And, it's a chance that you take, chance that I take. How much can I push and how much can they push? And it's about finding that middle ground where both parties are happy. It has to be a compromise. How badly do I want this artist? How badly this artist want to be with the agency? And you just got to find those defined lines.
And I think as an artist, you should, if you're not comfortable with something, talk to the agent. Don't just. I wouldn't just cross it out. I would say, here's my concerns. Here's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
Because when two people enter into a negotiation, that's what they should be saying to each other. Here's why I'm afraid of you. How are you afraid of me?
Right.
And that's really gets to the heart of it.
That's interesting. So I guess in that case, that double thumbs up that I was giving earlier, just getting a contract, scribbling something out and then sending them back. No, do not do that. But the idea of metaphorically crossing something out and having a discussion about a particular point, yes, absolutely. There is no contract that's set in stone, and I can speak directly to that. I've had inquiries from agents over the 12 years that I've been representing myself, and in some cases, obviously I'm still representing myself. I've had those negotiations, and it happened to be with an agent that wasn't that interested in having me. It was a larger one. It's actually been mentioned, and I, didn't cross it out, but basically opened the conversation for like, well, can we change this? What about this? And I was met with silence on the end. If I was incredibly desperate, I've lost it, but I'm not. You can do this alone, and I think it puts you, certainly my hope is that it puts you in a better position should you get into a relationship with an agent that genuinely wants you. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Good answer. Yeah. Okay, got a couple more here. There were a few questions I just want to let people know that were more about publishing and not really about agents, so I'm kind of skipping over those. Is there any, here's one, is there any way to get feedback from agencies when you submit? And that's from Laura.
Okay.
I wouldn't
Like-
count on it.
No, you are going to get feedback if the agency finds your work. Like, if we like your work, I will definitely call you back. Maybe I won't add you on at that very moment, but I will definitely say, look, your work is great, but there's not enough time in the day for me to call back every single inquiry and say, you know what, you should really move this to your third piece, and there's just not enough time.
No.
How many inquiries do you receive, Ryan, or just in
A
a
lot.
really?
No.
Okay. What are some red flags to look for with agent contracts? And that's expectations. That's from Florbella.
Firstborn?
What?
I feel like we kind of hit that, didn't we?
Okay.
Like,
Well, one for me would be, if you can't market on your own at all, and if you can't, the contract states that all marketing has to be done through your rep or agent, then you basically just change yourself to this agency that may or may not be working as fast as you want them to work. Maybe you have more energy to put towards your own marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a detriment to any business model. I mean, you would want to get their name out there as much as they want their name out there, and it just increases traffic on both parties. So I mean, that would be a red flag.
Okay. Final question. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
oh, there's one final question that I wanted to make sure you asked, but I want to see.
Go ahead. You ask that one instead. That'll be the final.
Okay. We often talk about how an agent can help us, but how can we help the agent be the best that they can be?
You read my mind.
Okay, good.
That was from Scott.
Yeah, and I'll take a minute and just say I think the way you can help an agent be the best that they can be is, number one, just be a good client for the people that she gets jobs for you. That's just going to foster a better relationship between everybody, between the future people that she goes to and the editors or art directors that she works with, and helping you get future work. I think also being very clear to that agent with what your expectations are and what you want to do, so having very open lines of communication. And then I think just being very prompt in communication. If they send you an email, don't wait longer than 24 hours to get back to them. If they call, answer the phone. Just be available when they need to get to you. Those are my three things.
That's great.
Yep. Great.
I think that's it.
All right.
Lee, you did a great job, and so
Thanks
did
for coming,
Ryan
you
and
guys.
David. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys. It's super fun.
a lot. That's great having your viewpoints on that, and seeing you in hats too. Always good. Will, do you want to go over what next month's is going to be, or are we saving that as a surprise? What's the?
We are going to talk about the absolute must-haves in your children's book portfolio next month.
Oh
Great.
wow, must have.
Sounds good.
I like how your camera conveniently broke when it's hat day, Luke.
Every day is hat day for me.
Oh boy.
So this is the new time. So the time that we had it at today is going to be our standard time. So we're not going to keep moving it around on all you guys. And I apologize for the last couple of months. We've kind of been changing things up a little bit, but we're pretty set, I believe, in this time and in this format and everything. So it should be a little easier as we move forward.
Yeah, we really did want to make sure that we can accommodate more people, and we realize that some people will be at work here in the U.S., but this will also allow people in Europe to see us at a decent hour. So
I think it's good, and it's it's okay to break away from work for a little bit. This is important.
That's
Yeah.
right. Pretend like you're working.
All right, I gotta go. So we'll see you guys.
Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.